And you have a PDF copy of these notes that you can scroll along with. Susan Poger's notes. All right, and the Congress of Vienna. So what Congress is just a fancy word for meeting. Okay, and after Napoleon, after they thought they got rid of him and exiled him to Elba, and then they really got rid of him in St. Helena. They have this meeting, this victory meeting. So if you can see, it starts before the 100 days and then ends well after that. Okay, so it's in Vienna, which is the seat of the Austrian Empire. All right, Austria is central to this whole thing, and you see there the ministers of all states are there with their cool profile coins and things. And essentially, it's two things. It's one, it's a serious amount of meetings on how we're going to put Europe back together. After, I mean, think of it. Since 1789, it's been craziness, right? French Revolution, all the phases of that, and then all the Napoleonic Wars. All kinds of monarchs are deposed and replaced and run away and things like that. So we got to put things back together. And there is they had a commemorative coin, all right, which would be part of your swag bag if you were a minister at the Congress of Vienna, right? And there's all the representatives, all, as you can tell, looking like Roman senators, if not emperors. All right. So what's on the agenda when they sit down during the daytime? Also at night, it's a big victory party. I don't remember if I said that. But essentially, it's the place to be. Okay, it's like a year-long Oscars or something. All the important people are in Vienna, partying at night and meeting during the day. So basically, it's to undo all the stuff Napoleon had done. All right, and then that leaves the question, which Napoleon also had to answer: how much of what the French Revolution did do we keep? And how much of it do we get rid of? And they have very different answers about that. All right. So they're going to put France back to the boundaries she had at 1790. Okay, so right at the beginning of the revolution, right before the constitutional monarchy was proclaimed in 1791, that's where they're going to put France at. Now, notice, okay, they're not out to destroy France. All right, this is going to change in 20th century wars, but they want France to continue to be a great power because they want Europe to be a stable place. So they're just going to reset France back to 1790. It's still going to be the biggest country in Europe and, you know, the richest and most populous, but they're going to dial back all that stuff that Napoleon took, and actually that the armies of the Revolution took in 1793, 4, and 5. Okay, so they're going to put France back to its 1790 borders, and they want to have essentially all the monarchies that Napoleon toppled. They're going to find the people who used to have those thrones and give them back. All right. And if that person's not around, you're going to give it to their nephew or their cousin. Basically, they want to put the ruling families of Europe back on their thrones. And here's a key event. Congress of Vienna is going to establish a framework for peace that's going to last for 99 years. All right. There's going to be some small, fast wars in Europe of national unification, but that's not until after 1870, well, 1866. And there'll be a big war in the 1850s, but it's in Crimea, far outside of Europe. There won't be a general European war between 1815 and 1914, and that's when World War I is going to happen. Okay, so what they do at the Congress of Vienna lasts a long time. It creates a balance of power, and essentially what the people at the meeting, and I'll show you who they were in a second, what they're convinced of is that war, if you have war and chaos, you can have revolution, all right? And if you allow revolution, you'll have more war. So war equals revolution. So they want to avoid war with each other at all costs. They want stability, right? They don't want a chaotic environment in which revolutionaries could come to power like they've seen. Right. So the key players, the key player is Clemens von Metternich. He's the chief advisor to the Habsburgs, and he hosts the meeting. Right, the meeting's in Austria, so it's on their turf. And he's really the founder of a new movement, which we'll talk about more later, called conservatism. Now, that sounds weird that conservatism would be new. But essentially, this new form of conservatism exists to push the clock back in all of Europe to before 1789. Metternich and other conservatives, they look at constitutions, they look at representative government, they look at Enlightenment values, and they say, what'd that get you? 25 years of war and millions of people dead. Okay, they say they don't want liberalism. They associate it with chaos and death. And so they want things to go back sort of to the way they were. We're going to see when we talk about conservatism, they talk about land, throne, and altar. Okay, those are it's a three-legged stool that conservatives, and we're talking Central and Eastern Europe, that they believe needs to be in play. And that is land, the nobility should have power. Throne, the monarch should have power, and altar, the church. So there's three-way cooperation to stop liberalism. That's what Metternich is all about. Right? Now, the Viscount Castlereagh from Britain, he's not about that. Britain is about, they're going to keep their, for the most part, relatively liberal government. And as you can see, they're mainly concerned about protecting and expanding their empire, not about maintaining peace in Europe. Now, Castlereagh is more into that than we're going to see his successor is. But Britain's always kind of doing their own thing. All right. Here's Frederick Wilhelm III of Prussia, right? And all Prussian kings are named either Frederick, Wilhelm, or Frederick Wilhelm. All right. He's conservative. And then the most conservative is Alexander I. We talked about him when we talked about Napoleon. He's the most conservative of all the representatives, right? And then Charles Maurice de Talleyrand, who's one of the most interesting figures in French history. He served with Napoleon, he served with Robespierre, and he's going to be the foreign minister to the Congress of Vienna for France. He's at the center of all of it, okay, even more than Abbé Sieyès was. And so these are your five main guys that are going to be architects of the peace that's going to establish itself in Europe. All right. So what do they want? How are they going to achieve a century of peace? Well, they're going to have a balance of power, right? And this is what is always aimed for by the Europeans. Remember in Italy, we had that balance of power. We had the Treaty of Lodi, right, where we had Venice and Milan and the Papal States and Florence, and whichever one I forgot to mention. They made an alliance where each side was basically roughly the same in power as the other side. So one side could not take advantage of the other. All right, and then Alexander VI messed all that up. But essentially, if you have a balance of power, it's less likely that they thought that you're going to have a war, because one side is not obviously stronger than the other. So the two sides will be afraid enough of each other that they won't start war. So you have to balance power. Legitimacy. This is their attempt to put all of the old rulers back on their thrones. They consider Napoleon's family and the rulers of that time to be illegitimate. And in other words, the way you're legitimate is if your family traditionally has been in charge of that area, you're going to get it back. So that's legitimacy, putting all the old royal families back on their thrones. Compensation, all right. They're going to demand that France pay for a lot of the damage and things that was done. And they're going to occupy France for 3 to 5 years until France pays back the amount. Okay? And this is called an indemnity. Okay? An indemnity is what you're paid if someone injures you. All right? This is usually done through insurance, right? So if someone totals your car, the check that you get from the insurance company is your indemnity. It's a payment for damage. And the powers at Vienna, they calculate France owes about 700 million francs. All right, we're done with livres, we're done with assignats, and we're on to francs now, which we will keep until 1996 when we switch to the euro. And so they said, you owe us about 700 million francs for the whole war. which is a big amount, but it's not so big that it's going to destroy France's economy. Remember, they don't want France to be destroyed. They want France to go back to being old France. And this, I'm highlighting this now to contrast it later with what's going to happen with Germany after World War I. But essentially, France is going to pay this off, and the occupying troops are going to leave. So it's a big amount, but it's France is able to repay Europe. All right. So what are the changes? And your assignment for today and through the weekend, besides chapter 16, is going to be another map. It's the exact same projection, but you're showing different things. All right? And it's going to focus on these changes, these territorial changes. All right. So as we said in the beginning, all the territory conquered by Napoleon is returned to whomever held it before. All right. Guess who gets shafted again? The Polish. Remember, they fought on Napoleon's side right up till the end, trying to get free of Russia, and their side lost. So most of Poland is given to Russia, and it's called the Duchy of Warsaw. And they're occupied there for quite a long time. Prussia, they're going to get half of Saxony. You probably don't recall, but that's what started the whole 7 Years' War. Was Frederick the Great wanting to get a big chunk of Saxony. So they finally get it. If you look at a map, which you will be doing a lot of, Prussia has all these little separate territories, and it's always the goal of the Fredericks, the Williams, or the Frederick Williams to connect all those up into one big connected state. So they always want to add little chunks to it. Kind of like in Monopoly, right? When you want to get all the properties of one color, or in any game where you get a multiplier bonus for having connected territories, they want all of their territories to be linked up. One thing Napoleon does that they keep, remember he made the Confederation of the Rhine. They essentially keep that, but they call it the Germanic Confederation, where they take the 300 plus German states that there had been, and they reduce that to 30 states, okay, one of which is Prussia. And they acknowledge that at the time, Austria is the most powerful German state, and will sort of be like big brother to all the other German states. Guess who doesn't like that? Right, Prussia. So that's going to change in the 19th century, which we're in the 19th century now. Right? Austria, remember, they lose. They're giving back what they lost, plus some bonuses in Germany, and particularly northern Italy. Austria is all about getting territory in northern Italy. And that's going to come into play again and again throughout this century. And the House of Orange, remember them? Remember William of Orange, who went and became King of England? The Dutch Republic and the Austrian Netherlands, remember we had the two different states, they're combined, and they're under the House of Orange. All right. So there's a map of the Germanic Confederation, and you can see, if you look back at Prussia in the 17th century, it was just a bunch of little dots, but now they've connected all of this stuff, and they've connected all of this, and there's just this tiny little space in between, right, that's keeping Prussia from being a completely connected country. Now, they're going to create powerful border states around France to check French expansion. Remember, they had this with Louis XIV. They had it with Napoleon. They are, they're afraid of the French Thanos just expanding. So they're going to put big enough states on its perimeter to hold it in check. So they're going to take Norway and Sweden and join them into one country, the Kingdom of Norway and Sweden. Right. Swiss neutrality, which they've been practicing for hundreds of years, but it's officially guaranteed at this. And so that's why Switzerland is neutral to this day, even through World Wars I and II, right, and the Cold War. Hanover is enlarged and made a kingdom. All right. And if you look at that, here's Hanover right here. And you can tell people are a little bit nervous about Prussia as well. So they're going to strengthen Hanover's position so it doesn't just get absorbed into Prussia. All right. So Hanover, remember the British kings are initially from Hanover, right? George the First, second, and third. Well, now it becomes once again it becomes its own kingdom. And what is Britain all about? Their empire. So they're given the southern tip of Africa and other colonies in Africa and Asia, which we'll get to more when we talk about imperialism. Sardinia, which is an Italian kingdom, it's given Piedmont, Nice, Savoy, and Genoa. Okay, so Sardinia is an island, but it's given Piedmont, which is northern Italy, Milan, the richest, best part of Italy, and then Nice and Savoy, which are border territories between Italy and France. So they lump those together into one much larger state to try and stop expansion down through Italy, as we've seen time and time again. All right. The Bourbons are put back on the throne of the Two Sicilies, which is the island of Sicily and then the southern part of the boot of Italy. That's the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. So it's enlarged. All right. The Duchy of Parma is given to Marie Louise. Okay. And then the slave trade is condemned at British urging. Okay. And essentially, they're going to get rid of slavery, and by the end of the 19th century, have replaced it with something worse for the people, that we'll talk about when we get into imperialism. All right. And freedom of navigation for rivers, especially like, remember the Danube from like the first week of school? Okay. The Rhine, which flows, between Germany and France and Austria. And so essentially freedom of travel, conservative rule, balance of power. That's what they want to achieve. And by any standards, they're successful. This is going to lead to 99 years of peace. Right? And so if you look at Europe after the Congress of Vienna, right, here you have Sweden and Norway, new place, Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, right? I'm sorry, Piedmont, Sardinia, Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, all right, the expanded Netherlands, which now includes Belgium. Okay, they lump all those into one territory. Okay, the Kingdom of Poland is now essentially just Russia West. Okay, look how big Prussia's gotten, and then Hanover right here is made into a kingdom. All right, so their goal was to check French expansion by making more powerful states, to undo everything Napoleon had did, except for keeping he had the Confederation of the Rhine, but they keep it now as the German Confederation. And these will be the borders that will only change modestly throughout the 1800s. All right, which brings me then to your second map.